The homicide investigation had already lasted 9 days. 3 detectives, 2 crime scene officers, 1 assistant district attorney, an entire laboratory staff. Everyone believed today's examination would finally identify the murder weapon. The sealed evidence bag rested alone beneath the white laboratory lights. No one touched it. Not because they weren't allowed, because they had been told to wait. The laboratory door opened. Marcus Hale walked in without looking at anyone. No introductions, no small talk, no questions. He placed a thin black folder on the stainless steel table beside the evidence bag. Someone quietly whispered, "That's him." Another technician answered, "I heard he's rejected evidence before." Marcus heard them. He gave no reaction. Instead, he put on a fresh pair of gloves. Not because he intended to touch the evidence, because he intended to touch everything around it. He examined the table, the evidence label, the barcode, the security seal, the chain of custody form, the signatures, the timestamps, the storage tag. Only after nearly a full minute did he finally look directly at the bag itself. The lead detective couldn't wait any longer. "So, can we open it?" Marcus didn't answer. The detective tried again. "Is something wrong?" Marcus slowly removed his gloves, folded them neatly, placed them beside the folder. Only then did he speak. No. The room fell silent. The assistant district attorney frowned. "No." "What?" Marcus looked at every face in the room, one by one, as if counting them. Then he looked back at the evidence bag. "This," he said quietly, "isn't evidence." Confused looks spread across the room. The detective stepped forward. "It came directly from the victim's apartment." Marcus nodded. "I believe you. The seal is intact. I believe that too. The paperwork is complete." Marcus looked down at the chain of custody form, then back at the detective. "I didn't say the paperwork was wrong." Another long silence. "I said this stopped becoming evidence before it arrived here." Nobody spoke. Nobody even moved. The assistant district attorney finally broke the silence. "If that isn't evidence, what exactly is it?" Marcus closed the folder, looked at the sealed bag one last time, then answered, "It's the reason your entire case is about to collapse." Nobody moved. The assistant district attorney stared at Marcus for several long seconds. Then he slowly smiled. "I understand." Marcus said nothing. The attorney looked around the room. "He wants certainty." He shrugged. "So do we." He turned toward the lead detective. "Open the bag." The detective reached for the evidence. Marcus spoke without raising his voice. "Don't." The detective stopped. For the first time, there was irritation in his face. "Marcus, we've spent 9 days building this case. We have search warrants. We have witnesses. We have surveillance. And now you're telling us not to look inside the single most important piece of evidence." Marcus remained calm. "Correct?" The detective laughed once, a short, tired laugh. "You know what I think?" Marcus waited. "I think you've been doing this job so long. You've forgotten what justice looks like." Nobody interrupted. The words hung in the room. Marcus nodded slowly. "That's possible." The detective seemed surprised by the answer. Marcus continued. "But I've also seen what happens when people confuse justice with certainty." The detective shook his head. "This isn't philosophy. This is a murder investigation." Marcus looked at the sealed bag. "No, this is evidence. And those are never the same thing." The assistant district attorney stepped closer. "Marcus, I'll ask you one last time. What exactly are you afraid of?" Marcus answered immediately. "I'm not afraid of what's inside." Silence. "I'm afraid. Everyone in this room already believes it." The room became quiet. The detective frowned. "Because we have every reason to." Marcus slowly looked around the laboratory. Every face, every pair of eyes, every person waiting for the bag to be opened. Then he quietly asked, "When did each of you decide that whatever is inside this bag must be true?" Nobody answered. Marcus nodded once. "Exactly." The detective lost his patience. "This is ridiculous." He grabbed the evidence bag. Marcus didn't try to stop him. He simply asked one final question. "If opening that bag proves you're wrong, will you still want the truth?" The detective froze. His hand remained on the evidence, but he didn't move. Nobody did. The laboratory remained silent. The evidence bag sat exactly where it had been from the beginning, untouched. The lead detective broke the silence. "You've given us opinions. We need facts." Marcus nodded. "Good. So do I." The detective pointed at the evidence bag. "Then tell us one fact." Marcus looked at the bag for several seconds. Then he looked away from it. "I can't." The detective almost smiled. "So, this is over." Marcus calmly shook his head. "No. It hasn't started." Confused faces filled the room. Marcus picked up the chain of custody form. He didn't read it. He simply held it in his hand. "Who wrote this report?" "The first responding officer." "Did you?" "No. Marcus handed the report to the evidence officer. Did you? No. He handed it to the laboratory technician. And you? No. Finally, he handed it to the assistant district attorney. You? No. Marcus took the report back, then placed it on the table beside the evidence bag. This document has convinced every person in this room. He gently tapped the paper with one finger. But nobody here created it. The detective frowned. That's how investigations work. Marcus nodded. Exactly. And that's why they sometimes fail. The detective stepped closer. So what's your point? Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he asked another question. Without reading the report, tell me where the evidence was found. The detective answered immediately. The victim's apartment. Marcus looked at the evidence officer. The victim's apartment. The technician gave the same answer. So did the prosecutor. Marcus quietly nodded. Then he asked one final question. How do you know? Nobody answered. The detective frowned. It's in the report. Marcus looked him directly in the eyes. I know. But I didn't ask what the report says. I asked how you know. Silence. For the first time, every person in the room looked down at the document instead of the evidence bag. Marcus watched them. He never smiled. He never looked satisfied. He simply spoke in the same calm voice. The evidence isn't controlling this investigation. He rested his hand on the report. This is... The detective looked at the paper, then at the evidence bag, then back at Marcus. His confidence was still there. But for the first time, so was doubt. Marcus closed his folder. Bring me the officer who wrote this report. The detective stared at him. Why? Marcus answered without hesitation. Because right now, he's the only person in this investigation who might actually remember what happened. Nobody spoke. Nobody reached for the evidence bag again. You've made your point. Marcus didn't answer. The detective stepped closer. But this investigation moves forward. He reached toward the evidence. Marcus spoke. Wait! The detective stopped. Not because Marcus sounded angry, because he sounded certain. Marcus picked up the investigation report. Without opening it, he carried it to the evidence vault. The steel door opened. He placed the report inside, closed the vault, locked it. The sharp click echoed through the laboratory. The assistant district attorney frowned. What are you doing? Marcus turned around. For the next 5 minutes. That report doesn't exist. Nobody understood. Marcus looked at the detective. Tell me where the bag was found. Beside the kitchen table. Marcus looked at the evidence officer. And you? The officer hesitated. I can't remember. Marcus nodded. The technician? I only received the bag. I never saw the scene. The prosecutor? I wasn't there. Marcus slowly looked back at the detective. You were the only person who answered immediately. The detective frowned. Because I read the report. Marcus said nothing. Instead, he unlocked the vault, removed the report, placed it back on the table. He still didn't open it. Neither did anyone else. They didn't need to. The detective glanced at it, almost by instinct. The evidence officer did the same. So did the prosecutor. Marcus watched them. Then he quietly asked, "Did you notice what just happened?" Nobody answered. You didn't search your memory. You searched for the report. Silence. Marcus rested one hand on the folder. This document has become louder than the people who wrote it. The detective looked down. For the first time, he didn't argue. Marcus continued. If I open that bag now, everyone in this room will believe whatever it appears to prove. He looked at each of them. But none of you can even tell me what you personally remember. Another long silence. The detective finally asked, "So what do you want?" Marcus answered immediately. "I want the first officer. The one who wrote the original report." The detective frowned. "Why him?" Marcus looked at the sealed evidence bag. "Because before we trust the evidence, I need to know whether we can still trust the memory that created the report." Nobody reached for the evidence bag again. No one spoke. The sealed evidence bag remained untouched. The detective looked at Marcus. "The first officer won't be here today." Marcus nodded. "I know." The assistant district attorney looked confused. "You knew?" Marcus closed the black folder. "That isn't why I asked for him." The detective frowned. "Then why did you?" Marcus looked at the evidence bag one last time. "Because I needed everyone in this room to realize that the only person who could still remember the beginning wasn't here." Silence. Marcus reached for a single sheet of paper. He signed it. The detective leaned forward. "What is that?" Marcus handed him the document. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Evidence rejected." The detective stared at him. "You can't do that." Marcus calmly met his eyes. "I already did." The assistant district attorney took the report. "If this is rejected, our murder case falls apart." Marcos didn't answer. The detective's voice grew louder. "You could let a killer walk free, Marcus remained silent for several long seconds. Then he finally spoke. No. He looked directly at the detective. The person who let a killer walk free was the first person who stopped protecting the evidence and started protecting the paperwork. Nobody moved. Nobody argued. Nobody reached for the bag. Marcus picked up his coat, stopped beside the laboratory door. Without turning around, he said one final sentence. Evidence isn't what convinces a jury. A long silence. It's what survives doubt. Marcus opened the door and quietly walked away. The sealed evidence bag never left the table. It was never opened. Not that day. Not by Marcus. Because after 32 years, he had learned something every new investigator eventually forgets. Curiosity solves mysteries. Discipline protects the truth.